The notification on my phone buzzed at exactly 7:30 in the morning, and I knew before opening it that my day was about to get worse. I was right. The Homeowners Association of Pinewood Estates in suburban Cleveland, Ohio, had just fined me $300 for noise violations. My crime: running my snowblower at 6 in the morning after a blizzard dumped 18 inches of snow across our neighborhood overnight. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing my snow-covered jacket and boots, staring at the email from Patricia Hendrickson, the HOA president. She had attached photos of my driveway, the timestamp clearly visible at 6:03 in the morning, along with a lengthy explanation about how the community quiet hours extended until 7 on weekdays. The fine was effective immediately, and I had 30 days to pay or face additional penalties. The thing was, I had been helping, not just clearing my own driveway but also my elderly neighbor's property, and I was planning to do the same for the Johnsons across the street who were on vacation in Florida. I had been up since 5:30, watching the snow finally stop, knowing that people would need to get to work. I ran my own contracting business, and I knew the value of starting early. I peeled off my winter gear and tossed it on the mudroom bench harder than necessary. My golden retriever, Murphy, looked up at me with concern from his bed in the corner. I pulled out my phone and reread the email, my blood pressure rising with each word. Patricia had copied half the board on the message, including Brenda Carmichael and Susan Fletcher, her faithful cronies who lived for these petty power trips. The community guidelines did technically state quiet hours until 7, but I had never heard of anyone actually enforcing this rule. People mowed lawns, started cars, and yes, cleared snow during these hours all the time. But Patricia had it out for me ever since I voted against her proposal to ban pickup trucks from driveways last year. I owned a Ford F-150 that I needed for work, and I was not about to park it on the street to appease her aesthetic sensibilities. I grabbed my coffee and sat down at my kitchen table, looking out at the winter wonderland that was now going to be everyone else's problem. If Patricia wanted to play it this way, fine. I would follow her rules to the letter. No more early morning snow removal. No more helping neighbors. From now on, I would clear my driveway during acceptable hours only, and everyone else could figure out their own situations. My phone rang, and I saw it was my neighbor, Gerald Martinez, the 78-year-old veteran whose driveway I had been halfway through clearing when I got the notification. "Quincy, you coming back to finish?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "Sorry, Gerald. I got slapped with a $300 fine for noise violations. Can't risk another one." There was silence on the other end. "Are you serious? It's nearly 8 now." "I started at 6. That's the problem. I'll come back at 7:05 tomorrow if we get more snow, but right now, I am done being the neighborhood snow removal service." Gerald sighed. "Patricia, who else? That woman has too much time on her hands. Don't worry about my driveway, son. I will figure something out." I felt guilty, but I was not backing down. After we hung up, I spent the next hour researching HOA regulations in Ohio. I discovered that while HOAs had significant power, they also had limitations. They had to follow their own bylaws consistently, which gave me an idea. I started documenting everything. I took photos of my computer screen showing the fine, saved all emails, and began keeping a log of every HOA interaction. The next morning brought another 6 inches of snow. My alarm went off at 6, and I lay in bed listening to the sound of snowblowers starting up and down the street. I counted at least 4 different machines running before 7. I grabbed my phone and recorded video of each one from my bedroom window, careful to capture timestamps. Then I waited until 7:15 to start my own snowblower. By the time I finished my driveway at 8, the street was a mess. The early risers who had ignored the quiet hours had clear driveways and were already gone for work. But Gerald's driveway remained buried. The Johnsons' house looked abandoned under all that snow. The Petersons next door to them, an older couple in their 70s, were outside with shovels, struggling with the heavy, wet snow. I wanted to help. Every fiber of my being wanted to fire up my snowblower and clear their driveways. But I thought about that $300 fine and stayed put. This was the HOA's doing, not mine. Patricia must have noticed the difference because my phone rang at 8:30. I did not recognize the number but answered anyway. Quincy Fletcher. This is Patricia Hendrickson from the HOA board. I know who you are, Patricia. Several residents have complained that you did not help with snow removal this morning like you usually do. Gerald Martinez specifically mentioned you refused to finish his driveway. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. That's correct. After receiving a $300 fine for violating quiet hours, I decided it was best to only clear my own property during approved hours. I would not want to rack up more fines. The fine was for starting too early. You could have helped after 7. I did my driveway after 7. It takes me about 45 minutes. By the time I was done, I had to get ready for work. I run my own business, Patricia. I do not have all morning. You have always helped the neighborhood before, and I got fined for it. So now I am following the rules exactly as written. Is there anything else? She sputtered for a moment before hanging up. I felt a small surge of satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by guilt when I looked out my window and saw Gerald carefully making his way down his still buried driveway to his mailbox, using a cane for balance. That evening, I knocked on Gerald's door with a bag of rock salt and my spare shovel. He answered with a warm smile despite the exhaustion obvious on his face. I cannot clear your snow during quiet hours without getting fined, I explained, but there's nothing in the rules about lending you equipment. This shovel is yours to borrow as long as you need it, and the salt is a gift. Gerald's eyes crinkled. You're a good man, Quincy. Do not let Patricia ruin that. I am not letting her ruin anything. I am just following the rules now. Over the next week, Cleveland got hammered with snow. We had 3 more significant snowfalls, each dropping between 4 and 8 inches. And each time, I waited until 7:05 to start my snowblower. I did my driveway, my sidewalk, and stopped. The neighborhood, which had relied on my early morning help for the past 3 winters, suddenly looked like a disaster zone by 8 in the morning. People who had to be at work by 7:30 or 8 were stuck. Some of them started trying to clear snow in the dark before dawn, creating dangerous situations. Others simply could not get out until later in the day. The Johnsons came home from Florida to find their driveway completely impassable, buried under nearly 3 feet of accumulated snow from multiple storms. I got calls and texts from several neighbors, asking what happened, asking why I stopped helping. I explained about the fine each time, and word spread quickly. The neighborhood sentiment started to turn against Patricia and the HOA board. People began questioning why the board was enforcing such a petty rule when my help had been making everyone's lives easier, but Patricia doubled down. At the monthly HOA meeting 2 weeks after the initial fine, she proposed even stricter noise ordinances. I made sure to attend, sitting in the back row of the community center with my documentation folder. We need to maintain the peaceful character of our neighborhood, Patricia said from her position at the front table. She was a woman in her mid-50s with short blonde hair styled in that specific way that screamed entitlement. Her pantsuit was perfectly pressed, and she had that condescending smile that made my teeth clench. Too many residents think they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, without considering their neighbors. Like clearing snow so people can get to work, someone called out. I recognized the voice as Tom Peterson, whose wife had nearly fallen on their icy driveway. Patricia's smile tightened. There are appropriate hours for loud machinery. Those hours are clearly stated in the community guidelines that everyone agreed to when purchasing their homes. Quincy Fletcher has been helping this neighborhood for 3 years, Gerald said, standing up slowly. He never asked for anything in return. He cleared driveways for the elderly, for people on vacation, for anyone who needed help, and you find him for it. Now look at our streets. Look at the accidents waiting to happen. He violated the rules, Brenda Carmichael chimed in. She sat next to Patricia, equally put together, equally smug. Rules exist for a reason. Then why have not you fined anyone else? I asked, standing up and pulling out my phone. Because I have video evidence of at least 8 other residents running snowblowers before 7 in the past 2 weeks. Should I submit those for review, or is this enforcement selective? The room went silent. Patricia's face flushed red. If you have evidence of violations, you should submit them through proper channels. Proper channels. Right. The same channels where I can appeal my bogus fine. I have been waiting 2 weeks for a response to my appeal. Your appeal was denied, Susan Fletcher said. She was younger than Patricia and Brenda, maybe early 40s, but twice as nasty. The decision was unanimous. Funny, I never got that notification. When was I supposed to receive it? Susan and Patricia exchanged glances. Patricia cleared her throat. We will ensure you receive the proper documentation. The meeting devolved from there. More residents spoke up about the snow situation. Patricia tried to maintain control, but it was clear she had miscalculated. The neighborhood was not on her side. When the meeting ended, at least a dozen people came up to thank me and express their frustration with the board. But thanking me did not clear their driveways, and I was not backing down. Patricia had created this situation, and I was going to let her deal with the consequences. The following Tuesday brought the biggest storm yet. The Weather Service predicted 15 to 20 inches, and they were not wrong. The snow started Tuesday afternoon and did not stop until Wednesday morning. I went to bed Tuesday night listening to the wind howl and snow pile up against my windows. My alarm went off at 6 Wednesday morning. I looked outside at a winter nightmare. Snow had drifted against houses, buried cars, and made the streets nearly impassable. I saw my neighbor Steve Hutchins trying to dig out his car with a regular shovel, already looking defeated. The snow was up to his thighs in some spots. I waited. I made coffee. I fed Murphy. I checked my emails. At 7:03 I bundled up and went outside. My snowblower struggled with the deep, heavy snow, but I managed to clear a path down my driveway and along my section of sidewalk. It took over an hour. By the time I finished, I was exhausted, and I still had to get ready for work. Gerald's house looked like an igloo. The Johnsons had given up and were parked on the street, unable to get their car into their buried driveway. The Petersons were not even trying. All up and down the street, people were stuck, struggling, or had simply surrendered to the snow. My phone started ringing before I even got back inside. Patricia's number. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I declined the call, then I got a text. Call me immediately. Emergency board meeting. I texted back. At work. What's the emergency? Snow situation is unacceptable. Need to discuss solutions. I cleared my property according to regulations. Not sure what needs discussing. She did not respond, but an hour later I got an email about a mandatory emergency HOA meeting that evening at 7. I debated not going, but curiosity got the better of me. The community center was packed when I arrived. Every seat was taken, and people lined the walls. The energy was different from the last meeting. People looked angry, frustrated, exhausted. Patricia sat at the front table with Brenda and Susan, all three looking like they had been through a war. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Patricia began, her voice strained. "As you are all aware, we had a significant snowfall, and the neighborhood is facing challenges with snow removal." "Challenges?" someone yelled. "My mother is 79 and could not get out of her house today for her doctor's appointment. She missed her cardiac checkup." "I understand everyone is frustrated," Patricia said, "but we need to work together to find solutions." "The solution was working fine until you find the one person who was helping everyone," Tom Peterson said. "Quincy cleared half the neighborhood every time it snowed. He did it for free on his own time, using his own equipment, and you punished him for it." "He violated quiet hours," Brenda said firmly. "So have dozens of other people," I said, standing up. "But only I got fined. Why is that, Patricia?" She glared at me. "Your violation was reported by a concerned neighbor." "Who?" "That information is confidential." "Convenient." "So let me get this straight. Someone mysteriously reported me for helping the neighborhood. You fined me $300. I stopped helping. Now everyone is suffering, and you called an emergency meeting to discuss solutions. The solution is obvious. Rescind the fine and I will go back to helping. Otherwise, everyone is on their own." The room erupted in agreement. People were nodding, calling out support, demanding the board reverse their decision. Patricia tried to maintain order, but she had lost the room. "The fine stands," she said, practically shouting over the noise. "It was issued according to our guidelines, and we cannot simply reverse fines because people are unhappy with them." "Then we are done here," I said, heading for the door. "Good luck with the next snowstorm." I hear Friday is supposed to be bad. I left the meeting to the sound of chaos erupting behind me. My phone blew up with texts from neighbors, some thanking me, others begging me to reconsider. But I was committed now. This was about principle. Patricia had made this personal, and I was not going to reward her behavior. Friday's storm was indeed bad. Another 8 inches fell overnight. Saturday morning at 7:05, I cleared my property and watched the neighborhood struggle. By this point, several people had hired professional snow removal services, but they were expensive and overwhelmed with demand. The companies were quoting 3 to 4 hour wait times, and some were not showing up at all. That afternoon, I got a visitor. A man in his 60s wearing a heavy coat knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Richard Nelson, a member of the HOA board that I had never seen at meetings. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. "I want to talk about this situation." I let him in, offered him coffee, and we sat in my living room. Murphy immediately went to him for pets, traitor that he was. "I have been on this board for 8 years, Richard said. "I am not Patricia's biggest fan, to put it mildly. I voted against your fine for what it is worth. So did 2 other board members. But Patricia, Brenda, and Susan pushed it through. It only takes 3 votes, out of 7, yes, and Patricia has been stacking votes in her favor for years. She forced out 2 board members who disagreed with her last year, and we replaced them with people she hand-picked." He sighed. "Look, I am here unofficially to ask you to reconsider helping the neighborhood. I know it is not fair, and I know you are justifiably angry, but people are really struggling. Then the board should rescind the fine. I wish we could. I have been trying to call for a vote, but Patricia keeps blocking it. She says it would set a bad precedent, that it would undermine the board's authority." "Her authority, you mean?" Richard nodded. "Exactly. This is about control for her. It always has been. But in the meantime, Real people are suffering. Gerald Martinez twisted his ankle trying to clear his driveway yesterday. The ambulance had trouble getting to the Stevenson house because their street was so blocked with snow. This is getting dangerous. I felt a pang of guilt about Gerald, but I pushed it down. Then maybe people need to understand who is really responsible for this situation. It is not me. I am following the rules Patricia insisted on enforcing. I know. And honestly, I think you are right to stand your ground. Patricia needs to face consequences for her actions. I just wanted to talk to you person to person and see if there was any way to resolve this. There is. Rescind the fine, formally apologize, and put in writing that reasonable early morning snow removal is acceptable during winter months. Those are my terms. Richard smiled sadly. Patricia will never agree to that. Then I guess we are at an impasse. After Richard left, I felt worse, not better. I was making a point, yes, but people were genuinely suffering. Gerald was hurt. Emergency services were being affected. This was spiraling beyond a simple HOA dispute. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about what Richard said about the Stevenson emergency, about Gerald's ankle. I was not the villain here, but I was not exactly being a hero either. Around 2 in the morning, I made a decision. The next morning, Sunday, I woke up early and started clearing snow, not during quiet hours, but at 7 sharp. I did my driveway first, then Gerald's, then the Johnsons', then the Petersons'. I worked my way down the street, clearing driveways for anyone who needed help. My back ached, my hands were frozen, and I was exhausted, but I kept going. People came out to thank me, offering money that I refused, offering coffee and food that I accepted. By noon, I had cleared 15 driveways. Gerald came out with his ankle wrapped and tears in his eyes. "You did not have to do this," he said. "Yeah, I did. I was making a point, but people were getting hurt. That's not what I am about. Patricia is not going to like this. Patricia can deal with it. I am doing this at acceptable hours, following every rule in the book. If she has a problem, she can take it up with the board." Of course, Patricia did have a problem. Monday morning, I received another email, this one even more furious than the first. I had apparently violated several other obscure rules, including commercial activity without proper permits, because some neighbors had tried to pay me, creating visual blight by piling snow in unapproved locations, and excessive noise duration, because I had run my snowblower for over 4 hours on Sunday. The fines totaled $800. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the email 3 times to make sure I was understanding correctly. Patricia was actually doubling down. She was actually trying to fine me for helping people during approved hours. This was beyond petty. This was vindictive. I forwarded the email to Richard Nelson and asked for his advice. He called me within 10 minutes. "This is insane," he said. "She's reaching. Half of these violations are questionable at best, fabricated at worst. Quincy, I think it is time to lawyer up. For an HOA dispute. This has gone beyond normal HOA stuff. Patricia is harassing you. Document everything. Get a lawyer who specializes in HOA disputes. There are grounds for legal action here." I spent Monday afternoon researching lawyers in Cleveland who handled HOA cases. I found a woman named Deanna Foster, whose website was filled with testimonials from homeowners who had fought back against overreaching associations. I called her office and managed to get an appointment for Wednesday. Tuesday brought another complication. I received a certified letter from the HOA's lawyer demanding payment of all outstanding fines within 14 days or face a lien on my property. This was escalating fast. A lien could affect my ability to sell my house, could damage my credit, could cost me thousands in legal fees to resolve. I called Deanna Foster's office back and explained the situation. Her receptionist squeezed me in for an emergency consultation that afternoon. Deanna turned out to be a sharp woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense attitude and a thick file of successful cases against HOAs. "They are overreaching," she said after reviewing my documentation. "Significantly. The initial fine for quiet hours is defensible, although selective enforcement is problematic. But these additional fines, the threat of a lien after 1 month, this is harassment. We can fight this." "What will it cost?" She quoted me a retainer fee that made me wince, but I was past caring about the money. This was about principle now. We spent 2 hours going through every document, every email, every interaction with Patricia and the board. Deanna took copious notes and explained our strategy. "First, we are going to file a formal complaint with the board about selective enforcement. I have other clients in Pinewood Estates who have reached out over the years about Patricia. We are going to document a pattern of harassment. Second, we are going to demand a formal hearing on all fines, which is your right under Ohio law. Third, we are going to make it very clear that any lien will be challenged legally, which will cost them far more in legal fees than they will ever collect from you." What are my chances? Good. Very good, actually. HOAs have power, but they're not above the law. Patricia has overstepped, and we are going to make sure she faces consequences. I left Diana's office feeling better than I had in weeks. Finally, I was taking action instead of just reacting, but the relief was short-lived. That evening, I discovered that Patricia had called an emergency board meeting without proper notice and passed a special assessment fee of $500 per household for emergency snow removal services. The neighborhood was in an uproar. My phone rang constantly with angry neighbors demanding to know what was happening. Apparently, Patricia had hired a professional snow removal company at an inflated rate to clear common areas and any driveways where residents requested service. The cost was being passed to all homeowners in the community, regardless of whether they used the service. "Can she even do that?" Gerald asked when he called. "I do not know, but my lawyer might. Let me ask." I emailed Deanna, who responded within an hour. Special assessments required proper notice, and in most cases, a vote of the membership. An emergency assessment was possible, but only under specific circumstances defined in the HOA bylaws. She requested a copy of Pinewood Estates bylaws, which I had saved on my computer. After reviewing them, Deanna called me. She violated the bylaws. Emergency assessments are only allowed for immediate threats to safety or property, and they require a vote of at least 5 board members. If she only had her 3 cronies vote, this assessment is invalid. What do we do? We file an injunction, and we do it tomorrow. Wednesday morning, Diana filed an emergency injunction in Cuyahoga County Court to halt the collection of the special assessment. She also filed a formal complaint against the HOA board for multiple violations of their own bylaws and Ohio HOA regulations. The court scheduled a hearing for the following week. Patricia, predictably, lost her mind. I received a cease and desist letter from the HOA's lawyer, claiming I was harassing the board and threatening me with additional legal action. Deanna laughed when I showed it to her. They have nothing. This is intimidation, pure and simple. Ignore it. The neighborhood was firmly on my side now. A group of residents, led by Richard Nelson and Gerald, started a petition to recall Patricia and the other board members. Within 3 days, they had signatures from over 60% of homeowners. The recall election was scheduled for the following month per the bylaws. But Patricia was not going down without a fight. She started sending out mass emails to all residents, claiming I was a troublemaker who was trying to destroy the community, that I had violated numerous rules, that I was refusing to pay legitimate fines. She painted herself as the reasonable one, just trying to maintain order and property values. Some people believed her. I started getting dirty looks from a few neighbors who I had thought were friendly. Someone left a nasty note on my truck calling me selfish. Another resident confronted me at the grocery store, saying I was costing everyone money with my vendetta. It wore on me. I had lived in this neighborhood for 5 years. I liked it here. I had friends, relationships, a sense of community. Now that was all fracturing because of Patricia's ego and my refusal to back down. The court hearing arrived on a cold February morning. Deanna and I sat on one side of the courtroom, while the HOA's lawyer, a slick guy in an expensive suit named Mark Crawford, sat on the other with Patricia, Brenda, and Susan. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Judge Carolyn Reeves. Deanna presented our case methodically. She showed the selective enforcement of the quiet hours rule, presenting the videos I had taken of other residents violating the same rule without consequence. She demonstrated how the additional fines were based on questionable interpretations of vague rules. She walked through the special assessment issue, showing how it violated the HOA's own bylaws. Mark Crawford tried to argue that HOAs had broad discretion in enforcement, that residents agreed to the rules when they purchased their homes, and that the board had acted in good faith. But Judge Reeves was not buying it. "Counselor," she said, interrupting Crawford mid-argument, "I have reviewed the bylaws. Your client's special assessment clearly violates Section 7.3, which requires 72 hours notice and a vote of at least 5 board members for any assessment over $200. Can you explain how a vote of 3 members with 0 notice complies with this requirement?" Crawford stammered through a response about emergency situations, but Judge Reeves cut him off. There was no emergency. The snow had already fallen. The situation had already occurred. This was not an emergency vote. This was a vindictive action taken against residents who were questioning the board's authority. She turned to Deanna. "The injunction is granted. The special assessment is void. Furthermore, I am ordering the board to conduct a full review of all fines issued in the past year and report back to this court in 30 days with evidence that all fines were issued consistently and in accordance with the bylaws." Patricia's face went white. Brenda looked like she might cry. Susan just stared at the table, but Judge Reeves was not done. "Additionally, I am ordering that any liens filed against Mr. Fletcher be immediately removed. The HOA will pay his legal fees to date, and if I find evidence of continued harassment, I will hold the board members personally liable." "Am I clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mark Crawford said quietly. "We left the courtroom victorious, but I did not feel like celebrating. This was not over. Patricia had been humiliated in court, and people like her did not take humiliation well. I was right to be concerned." Over the next week, I noticed small acts of vandalism. Someone let the air out of my truck tires one night. Another evening, my garbage cans were knocked over and trash scattered across my yard. A rock went through my front window with no explanation or evidence of who threw it. I installed security cameras, which immediately proved their worth. 3 nights after the window incident, the cameras caught a figure in dark clothing approaching my truck with what looked like a key. I called the police, who arrived quickly and caught the person in the act. It was Susan Fletcher, the younger board member. She was arrested for criminal mischief and vandalism. As the police put her in the patrol car, she was screaming about how I had destroyed the neighborhood, how I was ruining everything, how I deserved what was coming to me. It was unhinged and disturbing. The arrest made local news. HOA board member arrested in vandalism case, read the headline in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. The story detailed the ongoing dispute, the court case, and now Susan's arrest. Suddenly, Pinewood Estates was getting attention none of us wanted. The recall election was moved up by emergency vote of the residents. Within a week, Patricia, Brenda, and the remaining board members who had supported them were voted out. Richard Nelson was elected as the new president, along with a slate of reasonable people who actually cared about the community rather than power trips. Richard's first act as president was to formally rescind all of my fines and issue a written apology on behalf of the HOA. His second act was to draft new guidelines for snow removal that explicitly allowed reasonable early morning noise during winter months for the purpose of snow clearing. His third act was to authorize a payment to me for the legal fees the HOA had been ordered to pay, which covered Diana's costs completely. But the story did not end there. Susan Fletcher pleaded guilty to vandalism and was sentenced to community service and probation. During the investigation into her actions, police discovered that she had also been the one who filed the initial complaint against me for noise violations, and she had done so from Patricia's house, using Patricia's computer. This led to further investigation, and what they found was shocking. Patricia had been embezzling money from the HOA for over 2 years. The inflated snow removal contract. The company was owned by her cousin, and she was getting kickbacks. The special assessments and fines. Much of that money had been going into a separate account that only Patricia controlled. The total amount was over $50,000. Patricia was arrested at her home on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Brenda was arrested as an accessory since she had signed off on many of the questionable transactions. The HOA's lawyer, Mark Crawford, was also investigated for his role, though he claimed ignorance of the financial irregularities. The trial took place that summer. I attended every day, watching as prosecutors laid out Patricia's scheme in detail. She had systematically abused her position to enrich herself while claiming to be protecting the neighborhood. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, emails, testimony from the snow removal company owner who confirmed the kickback arrangement. Patricia's lawyer tried to paint her as a well-meaning volunteer who had made some bookkeeping errors, but nobody was buying it. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Judge Reeves, the same judge from our civil case, presided over sentencing. She gave Patricia 5 years in prison and ordered full restitution to the HOA. Brenda got 2 years and probation. Susan's vandalism conviction meant she also faced additional charges for conspiracy, though her sentence was lighter due to her cooperation with prosecutors. The neighborhood slowly recovered. Richard and the new board implemented sensible rules, focused on actual community needs rather than petty power plays. Property values, which had started to dip during all the drama, stabilized and began rising again. The local news did a follow-up story about how the community had come together to fight corruption. As for me, I went back to my routine. When it snowed, I cleared my driveway and then helped my neighbors. Gerald's driveway was always my second stop, and he always had coffee ready. The Johnsons bought me a new snowblower as a thank you gift, a top-of-the-line model that cut my clearing time in half. Other neighbors started joining in, creating an informal network where we all helped each other. One Saturday morning in March, after the last snow of the season, I was finishing up Gerald's driveway when Tom Peterson walked over. "Hey Quincy, bunch of us are getting together for a barbecue this afternoon, celebrating the end of winter and, the end of the Patricia era." You should come. I will be there. The barbecue was held at the community center, the same place where those contentious HOA meetings had occurred, but the atmosphere was completely different. People were laughing, kids were playing, and there was a genuine sense of community that had been missing during Patricia's reign. Richard pulled me aside at one point. You know, you could have just paid the fine and moved on. Most people would have. Why did you fight so hard? I thought about it for a moment. Because it was not really about the fine or the snow removal. It was about someone abusing power and thinking they could get away with it. If I had just rolled over, Patricia would have kept doing it. To me, to others, to the whole neighborhood. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when it is hard. Well, I am glad you did. We all are. The truth was, the whole experience had changed me. I had always been someone who avoided conflict, who went along to get along. But standing up to Patricia, fighting through the legal system, dealing with the harassment and vandalism, it had shown me that I was stronger than I thought. That doing the right thing was worth it, even when it came with costs. I also learned a lot about community. During the worst of the conflict, I had seen both the best and worst of people. I saw neighbors who stood by me, who signed petitions, who spoke up at meetings. I also saw neighbors who believed Patricia's lies, who turned against me, who valued their own comfort over justice. But in the end, the good outweighed the bad. Murphy and I walked home that evening as the sun set over Pinewood Estates. The streets were clear, spring was coming, and the neighborhood felt like a real community again. My truck, now without scratches thanks to a new paint job covered by Susan's restitution payments, sat in my driveway next to my new snowblower. I thought about the past few months, about everything that had happened, because I had refused to accept an unjust fine. Part of me wished it had never happened, that Patricia had just been a reasonable person, that the neighborhood had never been torn apart by conflict. But another part of me knew that sometimes conflict is necessary. Sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it would be easier to just pay the fine and move on. The next winter brought its own challenges, but they were normal challenges. Snow fell, we cleared it together, and life went on. Patricia was in prison, serving her sentence and presumably thinking about her choices. Susan had moved away after her conviction, unable to face the neighborhood she had tried to hurt. Brenda had also left, selling her house quietly and disappearing from our lives. The new HOA board functioned like it was supposed to. They maintained common areas, organized community events, and handled disputes fairly. There were still rules, but they were enforced consistently and reasonably. Nobody got fined for helping their neighbors. In December, almost a year after the initial fine that started everything, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Patricia, postmarked from the correctional facility where she was serving her sentence. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was not what I expected. It was not an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement. She wrote about how prison had given her time to think about her actions, about how she had lost sight of what the HOA was supposed to be about. She admitted that she had let power go to her head, that she had targeted me unfairly, that her actions had hurt a lot of people. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not make excuses. She just acknowledged what she had done and said she hoped the neighborhood was healing. At the end, she wrote something that stuck with me. You were right to fight back. I counted on people being too tired or too scared to stand up to me. Thank you for proving me wrong. I read the letter twice, then filed it away with all my other documentation from the case. Deanna Foster had suggested keeping everything as a record, just in case. But I did not think I would need it anymore. That chapter was closed. Life in Pinewood Estates continued. Gerald and I became closer friends, often having coffee together on Sunday mornings and talking about everything from politics to sports to his late wife, who he still missed terribly. The Johnsons invited me to their Christmas party every year. Tom Peterson and I started a neighborhood watch program that actually worked because it was about helping people, not controlling them. I even started dating someone I met through all the chaos. Her name was Amanda Morrison, and she had been one of the residents who spoke up for me at the HOA meetings. She lived 3 streets over and worked as a teacher at the local elementary school. We bonded over shared frustration with Patricia and eventually over much more. Amanda had her own HOA horror stories, though none quite as dramatic as mine. We joked that we should write a book about surviving homeowners associations, though neither of us had the time or energy to actually do it. We were too busy living our lives and enjoying the peace that had finally returned to the neighborhood. The following summer, the HOA organized a community garage sale. It was Richard's idea, a way to bring everyone together and raise some money for neighborhood improvements. I volunteered to help set up, and dozens of other residents did the same. It was a perfect July day, sunny but not too hot, with a nice breeze. As I was helping Gerald set up his table of vintage tools and old books, I looked around at the neighborhood. Kids were running around, neighbors were chatting and laughing, and there was a sense of unity that had been impossible during Patricia's time. It had taken a long fight and a lot of pain to get here, but we had made it. "You look thoughtful," Gerald observed. "Just thinking about how much has changed in the past year and a half. For the better, I would say. Definitely for the better." The garage sale was a huge success. We raised over $3,000, which the HOA board used to renovate the playground at the community center. When the new playground opened in September, there was a dedication ceremony. Richard gave a speech about community values and working together. He mentioned, briefly, the difficult times the neighborhood had been through and how we had emerged stronger. He did not mention Patricia by name, but everyone knew what he meant. We had survived a corrupt, power-hungry HOA president and come out better on the other side. It was not a story any of us would have chosen to live through, but it was our story now, part of the neighborhood's history. As fall turned to winter and the first snow of the season began to fall, I found myself standing in my driveway at 6 in the morning, snowblower ready, watching the flakes accumulate. This time, there was no hesitation, no worry about fines. I started the machine and began clearing my driveway, knowing that in a few minutes I would move on to Gerald's, then the Johnsons', then whoever else needed help. The sound of my snowblower was soon joined by others up and down the street. We had learned to help each other, to look out for one another, to be a real community. And if anyone had a problem with the noise, well, the new HOA board had made it very clear that reasonable early morning snow removal was not just allowed but encouraged. I finished my driveway and moved to Gerald's, waving at Tom Peterson, who was clearing his own property across the street. Amanda came out with travel mugs of coffee for both Gerald and me, kissing me on the cheek before heading to work. Murphy watched from the front window, happy and warm inside. It was a simple moment, an ordinary winter morning in suburban Cleveland. But it meant everything. It meant that standing up for what was right had been worth it, that fighting corruption and abuse of power, even at the HOA level, mattered. That communities could heal and become stronger after conflict. The snow kept falling, and I kept clearing it, knowing that this was what being a good neighbor really meant. Not following arbitrary rules set by petty tyrants, but helping people, showing up, and doing what was right even when it was inconvenient or difficult. Patricia's story ended in a prison cell. Brenda's in exile, and Susan's in court, ordered therapy and community service. But my story and the neighborhood's story was just continuing. We would have more winters, more challenges, more conflicts to navigate, but we would face them together as a real community should. I thought about that first notification on my phone, the one that had started everything. $300 for running my snowblower at dawn. At the time, it had seemed like the end of the world. Now, it felt like a beginning. A painful, difficult beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. As I moved from driveway to driveway, helping my neighbors start their days, I realized that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes. If Patricia had not fined me, she might still be embezzling from the HOA. The neighborhood might still be under her control. Good people might still be suffering in silence. Instead, by standing up to one unjust fine, by refusing to back down even when it got hard, even when I was doubted and harassed and vandalized, I had helped expose corruption and create real change. It was not heroic in any grand sense. I did not save lives or change the world, but I made my corner of it a little better. And really, is not that what we are all trying to do? Make our little corners of the world better, one cleared driveway at a time. Fight the small injustices so they do not become big ones. Stand up to bullies, whether they are HOA presidents or anyone else who thinks power gives them the right to hurt people. The snow continued falling throughout the morning, and I continued clearing it. My back would ache tomorrow, my hands were already getting cold, and I still had a full day of work ahead of me. But none of that mattered. I was doing what was right, helping my community, and refusing to let arbitrary rules or petty tyrants stop me. As the sun rose higher and the neighborhood came to life, I looked around at the clear driveways, the grateful waves from neighbors, and the community we had all worked so hard to reclaim. It was good to be home. It was good to be part of something bigger than myself. And it was good to know that when faced with injustice, I had not backed down. The snowblower hummed steadily as I moved to the next driveway, ready to face whatever came next.